My name is Dr. Tolulope Alugo from St. John Cap, and I'm so happy to have you all here today. Um, Over the last couple of weeks, we've been discussing all things ADHD, what it is, what it's not, treatment options, strategies for home and school. So, to wrap up our ADHD series, I have a special guest with us today. Her name is Dr. Diana Mercado-Marmarosh. I'm going to get her to introduce herself in detail. She's a family physician, she's a medical director, she's a nursing home director. She wears many hats. She's also an ADHD life coach, but I'm going to get her to explain all of that to you in further detail. Thank you very much, Dr. Diana Mercado Mamarosh. Sorry for slaughtering your name. I hope I pronounce it right. Thank you very much for joining us today. Please introduce yourself, what you do, where you're based, and all of that fun stuff.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. You can just call me Diana. That's okay. So I am in Texas, and I got diagnosed with ADHD during my first semester of medical school. And at that time, during that diagnosis, it was actually pointed out by my roommate that she felt like I was doing. Um, she said, "I think you're working too hard." And I said, "What do you mean? Like that's what you do in medical school. You study like your life depends on it, right?" But she says, "I don't know." She told me, "I see like people studying, but I see you like I don't know if it's overstudying, but you're just not retaining information." She said, "I don't know if you're anxious, depressed, stressed, or if you have something else going on." And so at that point, I went and I sought help because I was taking my test, and whatever I would get through, I would get right. But what I wouldn't finish, like I would get wrong or I would have to just guess. And so I was not completing the test. And I could remember um, having to like always be the last one in any test that I took, whether it was in high school or whether it was in college or even, those standardized tests that we had to do. And so that's how that diagnosis came about. Um, I'm a family medicine physician, and I lived in Texas since the age of 10. My parents are from Mexico, and they were immigrants, and they would get permission to come to the States to work in the produce. So they would pick up either watermelon or cantaloupe or asparagus or onions. They would get season passes, and they would come and they would work kind of like a caravan, like my grandpa, my grandma, my all my aunts. So it was an ordeal, right? And so then they would go back and they would go and come, they would go and come. And so one of the times on the way back, I was born in Texas, and but I grew up in Mexico till I was 10. And so um, was ADHD there all along? Yes, it was. But I think because people with ADHD tend to be curious and tend to want to be here, there, and everywhere, um, I think my parents just thought I had too much energy. And that was to be expected. Now,
Mhm.
I do remember my dad and my mom both having to come and sit down with me so that I could be quiet, so I wouldn't disrupt like the other people. Um, so when I came to the US, I had to do a program called English as a Second Language. And so I had to be put back like a couple of grades, like because I didn't know English, right? Of course,
No.
math is an international language, so I didn't have any problem there. Like I was already doing, multiplication, division, all kinds of stuff. And so because I started scoring well, and because I guess I was speaking out of turn too much, they would give me more work, more work, more work, and I would do the work. I found it interesting. That's the thing with ADHD. To me, I feel like it's almost like a misnamed because it says that we can't concentrate. However, sometimes we have the opposite that happens. We hyper focus on the things that are interesting to us. So for me, school was interesting, okay? But the things that we consider to be boring, oh my God, I mean, it's like, they're like, how are you not getting good grades? Like, you know, anywhere I didn't have to turn in a project, it was okay. I did the project, but I would just forget to bring it. So then that's where I would not get like the good grade from. But anytime it was work that I had to do right there and then, because
Mhm.
out of sight, out of mind, I wouldn't bring the other thing. But if it was there, it was fine, right? And so I'm pointing these things out because, like I said, I didn't get diagnosed till I was an adult. And for females, that tends to be sometimes the case, right? Like females, well, I was the very active one, right? But that was before my period, right? Before puberty. After puberty, females, they tend to like calm down a little more, and so we're in the room but our brain is like 10,000 other places, and people
Mhm.
are talking to us and we're looking at them and we're saying yes but we're not really paying attention, and then they're like, weren't you just listening to me? And I was like, yeah. And then you try to like catch what they said and you're like, I didn't catch what they said, either because maybe they spoke too much and then you already got lost,
Yeah.
or because it was boring to you and you stopped listening, right? And so again, it's not that we are trying to be mean, it's that
Mhm.
sometimes our brain is just in other places. And so in high school, I was, like I said, I love to study, right? So I was in NHS, which is the National Honor Society. You know, I was the vice president of that. I was in the math club and I would go compete. And I don't know why I can't do math now. I have to get a calculator out. But when I was there, I
Mhm.
had trophies. I'm like, I, I don't know, what you focus on and what you practice over and over, you get good at. And
Mhm.
so I think it makes sense that I was getting really good at those things because those type of competitions were like 10-minute competitions, like, it was short, like quick, versus when you have to sit there for a long time. My
Mhm.
brain was somewhere else, right? But it was short enough that my attention span was there for the things that you could hyper focus that you liked, and the things that were boring for you, I was in trouble for all the time, right? Like I
Yeah.
didn't want to make my bed, I didn't want to clean my room, I didn't want to do things that we should be able to do. But to me, they were so boring. And I would walk in there and I was overwhelmed. I didn't even know how to prioritize. Everything seemed like it needed to be done. And I didn't, like, I almost needed a checklist. Like, okay, start over here, then do that. And that sounds silly, but that's what my brain needed. And now
Mhm.
I know that because I've gone through coaching, right?
Right.
But before then, I just I was just too in my head. I didn't even know how to prioritize, right?
Yeah.
And so in high school, like I'm telling you, I'm involved in so many things. But I think the kicker was that I was in the cross country team, and
Mhm.
that meant I was running 10 miles a day or every other day. And so you could imagine that that was giving me the fuel that my brain needed, the dopamine,
Mhm.
right? Because ADHD, we have low dopamine. And so the body is going to ask you for what it needs. And unfortunately, sometimes it asks for high food with high sugar, right? And sometimes, unfortunately, it asks for drugs like cocaine, marijuana, alcohol. It's not that you're wanting to become addicted to that or anything like that,
Mhm.
but it's almost like it helps you function, right?
Yeah.
Luckily, I didn't get to that stage, but the studies show all that, right? The
Mhm.
studies show that somebody that has ADHD and is not recognized and is not diagnosed can end up in trouble. Like, not only like financial trouble because you forget
So.
to pay, right? You're paying all these late fees, right?
Mhm.
Or you might, again, get yourself in trouble getting some medications or some things that you shouldn't be getting yourself into because, quote unquote, it helps you function. Or the studies also show that a lot of people that are in jail for things that they did, some of them have ADHD because of their impulsivity and
Yeah.
their overreaction, that emotional dysregulation.
Mhm.
However, what I want to tell you today is that ADHD is a gift. You just have to learn how to unwrap it. If you ignore it, you can get yourself in trouble. I just told you all the things, right? I mean, sometimes it can lead.
Before you go there into the fact that it's a gift, I just had a couple of things I wanted to highlight just for our viewers, because I mean there are people who may be watching who have ADHD themselves or who are parents. So you mentioned a couple of important things. One is that girls tend to get diagnosed later. And I see that in my practice as well, because the boys are boisterous, they are disrupting the classroom, while the girls are just quietly daydreaming and doodling. So, do you think being a girl contributed to your late diagnosis? Because even though you were running around and doing all this in high school, nobody thought you had anything unusual going on. Did you think there was anything going on yourself before your roommate pinpointed it?
No, really, I didn't. I mean, if you looked around, all my family was like me, so it was common, right? Like we would sometimes overreact about something,
Mhm.
the emotional dysregulation part of it, and
Right.
then like 5 minutes later, it's like nothing happened, and we're
Mhm.
laughing and whatever, right? I was always used to losing things. Like that was just the norm. Like my mom would always say, "Child, if your head is not attached, I don't know how you would know if you have a head." So like it was just a normal thing. Like I was always calling my mom, "Hey, mom, can you bring me this?" Like at the school,
Mhm. Yeah.
or I'm at work. "Hey, mom, can you bring me my badge? I forgot my badge." Like it was always something, right? And of course, this time awareness, like somehow we're supposed to get to the doctor's appointment at 10 o'clock, right? And you leave your house at 9:50, and like you didn't account for like the traffic and the fact that it takes you 20 minutes to even get there. And
Mhm.
so all this like time things. I mean, even I got when I got married, like we had to do two types of invitations, like for my family and for my husband's family, my husband's
Right.
wife. So my husband's family got the normal time. My family got 1 hour like earlier so they could show up on time. And so like that was just the norm. So to me there was nothing wrong. Like in my family, I had been taught that if you wanted to go somewhere, it had to be through education, and if
Right.
you wanted to go use that, you had to study hard, you had to work hard, that nothing was ever going to be given to you. So in my mind, whenever I was struggling in college or I was doing this or that, in my mind it just meant I had to go get a tutor, I just had to work harder. Like I never made it mean anything. So I
Mhm.
think in a sense, not having the diagnosis of ADHD before I had it was helpful, because I didn't know if there was anything quote unquote wrong. This was
Mhm.
just the way I was. And it just meant that sometimes I had to do A, B, C, D until I finally got it, right? And because I wanted to get it, there was nobody who was going to keep me from what I wanted once I had
Mhm.
made up my mind,
Right.
right? Even though it was the complicated thing, like becoming a doctor or a physician, uh, it was not, if that's what I said I was going to do, even though I was the first one to do it,
Mhm.
the fact that I had didn't know anybody that wasn't doing it, like, was not going to discourage me. I was just going to keep asking questions.
Mhm.
Eventually the answer was going to come up.
Exactly. Yeah. And when you were eventually diagnosed, what happened from that point? When you got the diagnosis, did that change anything for you? How did things progress from that point?
Yeah. So when I got the diagnosis, and first, a lot of people, it might be a relief, right? Like they might be like, "Oh, thank God, finally I know why," right?
Mhm.
But for me, it was like a shameful thing. Like for me, because I was the oldest child, in my mind, I had to be the perfect child. Like
Mhm.
that's like what made sense to me. Like my worth to me in my mind was equal to perfect grades,
Right.
like that was my identity, right?
Mhm.
And so when all of a sudden I'm told you have ADHD, in my mind, I was like, oh my God, I'm broken. That's it. I'm not perfect. That means I can never be nothing. Like, oh my God, don't tell anybody. How did I get into med school? Like, I'm a fraud. Like, I'm an imposter. All kind of things were in my mind. Like, I was questioning myself. I was questioning my worth. I was questioning my intelligence. Um, and then because I was thinking differently than some of my classmates, I would pick up things that other people wouldn't pick up, which I didn't realize that was one of the beautiful gifts of ADHD, that you're able to
Mhm.
walk in and scan the room, and what people say and don't say, you can read between the lines, and you're able to be intuitive and have more ability to ask questions. However, because of that, I love that. The thing is, we have no time awareness. So I can be in the room for 5 minutes or 45 minutes, and it's, to me, it's still 5 minutes. And so you could imagine having that and not being aware that all that was part of ADHD would get me into a lot of trouble during medical school and residency, and then as an attending, right? Because I couldn't differentiate at the beginning, or even now I'm better because I've gone through coaching and stuff like that and years of practice. But I couldn't, again, the same thing. Everything seemed like a priority to me, right? And so you could hyper focus and have conversations for hours, but then you're going and talking to your attending, and they're looking at you like, child, I don't need the Bible. I just needed like one paragraph from that whole thing you just told me. Like, can you tell me the important things? And you're looking at them like a deer in the headlines. Well, isn't it all important? Like, how do I know what's important? And so you can see why, to my other people, I could have been labeled as too slow,
Mhm.
like can't prioritize, can't pick tasks, but but that was also the beautiful thing that my patients love, because they're like, she's the first one to listen to me. She's the first one who figured this out, right? She's the first one who saw through all the bullshit I was saying, excuse my language, right? But basically, what I'm trying to say is that we're able to listen well, and we're able to analyze it in a different way.
Right.
And so, but at the beginning, your question was, how did it change me? Like I said, I was in my head. I had an inner critic, right?
Yeah.
I was living from a place of fear. I was afraid that I was, again, because I was too slow. That was what my brain was telling me. I was too slow. I would complicate the way I was presenting to things. People probably thought I was disorganized. So I was afraid that they were going to tell me, I don't know how you got here, and you shouldn't be here, and you need to leave. And so that's where my brain always kept going. And so I was learning and learning, but it was from a place of fear. It wasn't from a place of like, it was a love hate relationship, because I love my patients, but I was always afraid that I didn't know enough. That I was going to cause something bad to happen to them. And so I had to ask more questions and more questions and more questions. Now I understand how to navigate all that. And now I understand that, like I was telling you earlier, it could be a gift if you understand how you think and you don't fall into some of the traps that your brain offers you.
And you talk about how it affected your work life. What of family life? Did you find out that some of those symptoms affected family life for you?
Yes, of course. Um, so again, okay, so after I finished residency, I was told by one of my attendees who was refilling my medication. She said, you're not a student anymore. Now you're a physician. You should stop coming to the student health clinic. You need to go find your own psychiatrist. And 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 so I did. In Houston, there's lots of physicians. I picked a
Mhm.
random person. Unfortunately, the one that I picked was not very familiar with ADHD in adults. um, Now I guess I understand all that, and I don't make it mean anything. But at that point, when I went and I saw him, he didn't even spend 2 minutes in the room, and he told me, you're a physician, you should know better, you outgrow ADHD. And he walked out, and he didn't
Wow.
give me any medications or nothing, even though I had brought him like my records and my tests, where they had tested me for 8 to 9 hours in my medical school, through a neuro evaluation exam. He didn't even want to look at that. He said, you should know better. And he walked out. And so that got me to be even more ashamed of myself. And for the next 10 years, I basically ignored my diagnosis. And boy, did it cost me and my family. Again, because unfortunately, I joke around now and I say, oh my God, my husband was my medicine, because he had to help me be so pick up everything that I could not pick up, so to say. And unfortunately, you know, pandemic hits, and then you get even more stress because however you were trying to function. And by function, I mean working like 20 to 30 hours outside of work, trying to complete tasks that my colleagues would complete within work, which was the charting and looking at labs and looking at things. And in my mind, again, because I didn't have an awareness of how long I was in the room, I was like, what do you mean? I just did an awesome performance. They're happy. I'm happy. What do you want me to write another note? That's boring. Why do I have to do that? And then, of course, if you see 20 patients a day, and I had about 300, 2 to 300 notes open, like that was the norm all the time. And we know that the sooner you close the note, probably the most accurate it is, right? Because fresh mind, fresh note, right? But
Yes.
in my mind, again, I didn't know how to differentiate. I didn't know how to make a note just on what happened today, not like their lifetime. Like every time I was trying to write a book, not like a page in the chapter, right? I was trying to write a book. So you can imagine why it was so hard and so painful for me, because my brain was telling me, you're slow, you're not a good writer, this is painful, you have to go write a book. Let's go write the book. You love your patients, write the book. Suck it up. Write the book. Write
So
the book.
how did you get help? How did you get help for that? Because that sounds like it was really stressful.
It was stressful, but that's the thing, right? Because I love my patients, I was willing to do what I needed to do. But then, like I said, pandemic hits, and I think the good thing about the pandemic is that it brought to light that most of us, or some of us, were functioning at a level that maybe was not ideal, but we kept going because we thought that was the norm. And so I always wanted to learn things. And because, like you said, you're asking, how did it affect my family? Well, it was a hot mess. I was listening to podcasts like how to declutter, how to clean, how to, like, I was trying to learn how to be an adult. Like in my mind, I was like, I'm not an adult. I felt like half of an adult, half of a mother, half of a wife. Like I did not feel like I was competent at anything. Like half of a physician. Like I really felt like that, right? So I was listening to podcasts, driving back and forth. I drive 30 minutes each way to my work, and listening to declutter podcasts, listening to like anything, like listening to physicians talking about other problems, right? And from there, I listened to one program that it was talking about life coaching. And I was like, what is that? And so in my mind, it was voodoo. That's what I thought. Like, I was like, what are they going to tell me? Just get my life together? Like, I don't know that I need to do that. Right. But I decided, well, what do I have to lose? Let me try this course. It was called Empowering Women Physicians. It was by Dr. Sunny Smith, and it provided clinical medical education. I was like, this is perfect. And so the whole program was about preventing burnout. And I was like, I'm not burned out, I'm just tired. Like that's what I kept telling. But I did that questionnaire, and then I was like, oh my God, I'm burned out. I didn't even know. And so the thing is, like, sometimes you're not even aware of how sub level you're functioning, because you just expect that to be the norm. When I had, at that time I had a 1 and a 2 year old, and I, you just mentioned all my hats that I was wearing. So I thought, what else, right? Like, of course, that is the way I'm gonna feel. But from there, it came, it became obvious that my thought about the diagnosis of ADHD, my thoughts about it was causing me the pain and the inner critic and all that stuff. And so that I could choose to think that it was a diagnosis just like anything else, like high blood pressure, like diabetes, it's genetic. You can either learn about it and get yourself more support, or you can ignore it like I had for the last 10 years. And obviously that was costing me time and money, you know and I didn't even realize how much money. I ended up doing the math, and I was probably not getting like 60 to $70,000 a year for unpaid time for all that charting. I mean, man, that's a lot of time and
Well,
money.
time and money, yeah. Can I interrupt you here just to say I know we have a question in the chat, but we'll address it at the end. We are just about maybe 5-10 minutes towards the end. So please hang on, we'll answer any questions or any comments at the end. Okay. Yeah, so that was a lot of money you were putting on the table just with unfinished charts. So I know that you've kind of gone from that getting help to now helping other physicians. And that's fantastic. I think for many parents it's encouraging to know that their child with ADHD can become anything, can become a physician, can become any other professionals. So I'm wondering, how do you help these other physicians? And are there other professionals that you come into contact with ADHD that you're also helping?
Yes, I think starting the conversation goes a long way, because when we are in our heads and we don't share with others what our worries are, they seem bigger than they actually are, right? And so once I realized that what I was thinking made the difference, I went and I started to get ADHD one-on-one help, group help. And then when I was, again, you hyper focus on the things you like, all of a sudden I took a deep dive, I started learning everything I could. And then I said, well, I'm just going to start sharing my story. Maybe somebody doesn't have to spend 10 years trying to learn this
Mhm.
painful thing that I neglected, right? And so I started helping people to create systems. And the more I looked and looked and looked, I couldn't see a physician ADHD life coach. I could see ADHD coaches, I could see life coaches, but I didn't see one that was doing both. And
Mhm.
so that's when I decided, okay, I need to share my story. They don't have to have ADHD if they want to work with me, but if there's somebody who thinks that they don't have time awareness or lack of prioritization, or or just like time just flies away from them, or they feel like they can't accomplish everything that they want to, that's when I decided to start doing group coaching to help people find their zone of genius so that they could set up systems that were aligned with their values, aligned with uh, self care, self coaching, prioritizing, chart management, but more importantly, their own life, where they decide that their family is a priority, that they are a priority, because many times we spend all our time at work, and then we come home to the people that matter the most and we're spent and we don't even like acknowledge them because we're so tired and drained. But what I taught these physicians and what I'm teaching these physicians is that work and play are just as important.
Mhm.
You know, rest is just as important, because look at your phone, look at your car. If you don't charge it, it's going to be dead, right? So it's like same
So,
thing for us. If we don't sleep, we don't eat, if we don't have fun, we're not going to perform at our optimum level. And not to perform like, but I mean, really enjoy. We only have one life, and we got to make sure that we enjoy it with the people that we want to enjoy it
mhm.
with. And the people that drain us, maybe it's time to let go of those people, because I had to learn almost at the age of 40 that saying no is a very powerful and very good thing to say, because when you say yes to everything, to people pleasing, you're saying no to yourself. So you got to learn to say no to the things that don't align with you, because that means yes to you, yes to your family, and understanding that everybody's way of seeing the world is going to be different. So
It's
you have to
different.
figure out, what do you want for you? And so your kid, if your kid has ADHD, they can do whatever they want. They can be an astronaut, they can be an ER doctor, they can be a family medicine doctor, they can be a lawyer. The thing is, as long as they enjoy what they're doing, they're going to hyper focus on it and they're going to excel. But if they're doing something that somebody has told them they need to do, that's going to be boring for them and they're not going to do well. So you just have to make sure that you get them to a therapist if they're in their head about their diagnosis, that you get them to a coach who can teach them, that we don't realize about the time, use timers, and that we don't realize that, when we're doing a project, we just want to tell you that it's going to take us 6 minutes to cook the pasta. The thing is, you first have to make sure you have the ingredients and you have to make sure you have the stuff to cook it. It sounds funny, but and an ordeal can easily become a 2-hour thing. And you asked me how long it takes, and I said 6 minutes, assuming I
Mhm.
had everything, but I didn't. So now I have to make a run, right? So that's the thing. Like when you realize that, then you realize that to have success, you just have to do a little bit of prepping, mindfully aware of that, because like I said, we think we're just gonna get there. It's like a magic elevator that's gonna stop time, right, for us, but it's not. So you just have to be that. So yeah, so you can think outside the box. You have multiple ideas. You have to choose one, and you can do all the things, just not all at once.
Okay, so we have one question. I think we should just take that question, and then I'm just going to recap, and I'm going to get you to give us one or two tips for parents of kids who may have ADHD, and what you think would be helpful to them. So this question says, how difficult is ADHD to diagnose in children? So maybe I'll go first, and then if you wanted to add anything else. I mean, in children, we tend to look at observing what they're like at home and in school. We get information about, they may be hyperactive or impulsive, not sitting still, not being organized. So usually going to your healthcare professional with as much information as possible would help a diagnosis. So provide previous school reports, provide observations at home, at school, at friends' houses, and all that information together would help your healthcare professional make a diagnosis. So it's just based on as much information as possible. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that question to Diana about.
Yes, that like you just said, like the diagnosis of ADHD is when somebody is experiencing certain symptoms 6 months or more, right? And like you just said, it's not just at school there's causing a disruption or ruckus, right? It's like all the environments, like how do they present, like when they're with you, when they're with the babysitter, when they're, with whatever, all the environments, right? And then can they stand still, right? Can Are they losing things? Are they in their head too much? Or all the things that you think might be contributing, right? And so it might sometimes get missed, like I said, especially in females, right? And sometimes it doesn't get diagnosed until later on, when the for females, especially after the birth of a first child, or when they get to law school, med school, or something higher education that all of a sudden questions them, or they become the CEO of their company or something, right? But in kids, if you think there's something going on, and the first person tells you no, everything's normal, but you still think there's something going on, go seek second or third opinion, because like I just shared with you with my experience, um, that doctor told me I should grow ADHD, and like there's 5 to 6% of children all across the world with ADHD, right? And there's 3 to 4%, and I think it's underdiagnosed.
Mhm.
Um, I think it is underdiagnosed, again, because of the mental stigma associated with it. But this is why I'm here to tell you, to share it, to normalize it, that it is nothing to be afraid of or ashamed of. It's a gift, and it can help you uh, go up in leadership, because unfortunately we already said what we were thinking before we even realized what we were thinking, which is good, because it might need to be brought up so that change can happen for the better. Just because things have been done a certain way, your brain allows you to see it a clearer way, in a different way. So it could be a gift.
Okay. So in wrapping up, I wanted you to just give parents who are listening one or two tips you think would help them with their child who may have a diagnosis of ADHD or even symptoms of ADHD.
Yeah, so one or two tips. One would be, if you haven't read the book ADHD 2.0 by Dr. Hollowell, I would recommend that you read that, because that book explains why we do certain things, and it can just give you a lot of clarity. And the other thing, there's a website called Attitude, ADDITUDE mag.com. That's a website that is for anybody, whether you have a kid with ADHD, whether you have a teenager with ADHD, whether you as an adult have ADHD, whether you have a partner that you're married to. It
I need to spell that again. ADDICUDE.
it's like attitude,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
ADDITUDEMAG.com.
Okay, I'm just going to put it in the comments so people can see that. Okay.
So that webpage has like free articles, free webinars, like they bring counselors, therapists, physicians, and they talk about all kinds of things regarding decluttering, financial organization, prioritization, um, relationships, like you name it, all for ADHD, right? And so that you can just start to get ideas on why we do things or don't do things so you can support them a little bit better. But one of the tips I would say is that, if like they get you mad, because we will, we will get people mad. If your kid gets you mad or your significant other gets you mad, you know it's good to how you talk to them. Like you can say, I see you're having a hard time now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because then you're pointing out the behavior, right? You're not saying that they are bad. If we say, oh my God, stop that, you're
Mm-hmm.
embarrassing me, all of a sudden you're kind of telling them that them as a person is
Mm-hmm.
bad. But if you point out, hey, I see you're struggling with this. Or let's say they forgot to turn in the homework. Instead of saying, again, you forgot to turn in your homework, like, and accusing them, even though that's
Right.
our human behavior, right? Or a human knee jerk reaction, right? You could ask things like, what do you think got you or prevented you from turning in the homework?
Mm-hmm.
What happened, right? Again, you're not judging there, you're just trying to understand, because it's in that awareness that the kid might make the correlation that, oh, I didn't put it in my backpack, or and so now they're going to be like, oh, for the future, I'm going to put stuff in my backpack and put it next to the door so that I always walk out because I know that I have this stuff in my backpack, right? And so it's asking them from a place of like, let me help you understand.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, when they're screaming and you want to scream, you scream too, and then you all start laughing, okay? Sometimes we have to let some steam out, right? Or
Yeah.
put on a
Sure.
music or something else. But the thing is, like, under the more conversations that you have and the more that you try to learn about it,
Mm-hmm.
then the easier it is for you to support them and support yourself, so that
Right.
you don't become irritated and so that you can allow it to help them flourish.
Good. Thank you so, so, so much. I'm so thankful that you came to talk to us and you've been so open. You've shared very practical information. Um, Dr. Mercado-Marmarosh's contact details are on the screen. So I think you have a website where we can reach you, a podcast, you're on TikTok. Like, man, you're so creative. You're also on Instagram.
Yeah,
And
TikToks is just 1 minute or less video, so you can come and consume that.
exactly. And you have a Facebook group as well for physicians, also called Beyond ADHD. Is that what it's called?
Hmm.
Yeah.
A
So
physician's perspective, yes.
okay, right. So, I mean, feel free to reach out to her through any of those channels. Keep following us here at St. John Cap as we continue to provide mental health information to empower youth mental health. Thank you so much. Thank you again for coming to have this chat with me today. And I just want to wish you all the best as you continue to empower physicians with ADHD and other individuals as well. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.